Learning AI Architecture with Tim Corey.
The AI DevOps podcast is a show for those shipping software using AI, .NET, Azure, and DevOps. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods and sharing success stories. Sponsoring the podcast is ClearMeasure, a software architecture and engineering firm that implements AI to empower software teams to establish quality, achieve stability, and increase speed. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that AI, Azure, and the .NET ecosystem has to offer. I'm excited for a repeat guest on our show today, back from episode 241, Tim Corey. He is a 9-time Microsoft Most Valuable Professional Award recipient, and he's a software developer with more than 30 years of experience and one of the most recognized online educators in the .NET ecosystem. He runs DevForge at imcorey.com. We'll include that in the show notes. He's helped millions of developers learn to think and code like professionals. He's the author of Getting Started with C A Practical Guide. He's a creator of the popular C Mastercourse, and he's the host of the DevQuestions podcast, which is now in its 7th season. And Tim learned software development the hard way, so he doesn't want his students to have to do it that way. And I love having him on the show, a great teacher overall. So Tim, welcome back. How are you, sir?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. It's been a good year.
Well, it's great to see you in person at the MVP Summit just a few weeks ago from the time of this recording. And glad to have you back on the show. You do such a good job teaching, and I want to kind of dive into that and to some of the topics and see if we can simplify some complex concepts. But for the people who maybe are just getting acquainted with you for the first time, all right, 30 years. That's a long time, but time flies when you're having fun. What is it about computers and programming and software development that keeps it fun, where you've stuck with this career for so long and you know haven't opted for a career change?
Part of it's being stubborn and just deciding I'm not going to do anything different. But actually, I love the challenge. If as a software developer you go into it thinking, boy, I don't want to struggle, it's not the career for you. Like this career is about the struggle. It's about figuring out what went wrong, figuring out how to accomplish something that you thought was impossible, or are doing some really new things different ways. And that's, to me, that's a lot of fun. And I have been blessed over my career to have been working, hundreds of different environments where you come into a situation, you're like, man, this is a lot. And then you find that solution, you find that workaround, you find that thing to do, and you're like, the light bulb goes on. You're like, man, this is an awesome solution. And I love coming home and I tell my wife, I'm like, oh, this is what I did. And she's like, okay, cool. Like, glad you're happy. Because it's just not the same because, it's that moment of discovery that I love. And maybe I don't share a lot of people, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun for me. And so I don't think I could do anything else. If you said, hey, you have unlimited money, you're retired, do whatever you want to do, I'm like, cool, I want a new laptop. Let's go ahead and build something. Like, that's just,
right. It's
a lot of fun, even when I'm not getting paid for it. I'm not, it's just what I like to do.
Yeah. Kind of like, some people have retirement wood shops where it's like, okay, I'm going to work out in my shop. Oh, it's just a different type of shop. So yeah, I think if I, retirement, I'd keep building things, experiment. Like I play my hand in a little garden. I think I'd automate the heck out of that garden, do the IoT things, and but it's still. So it seems like this field it's like a cross between a builder and a scientist. It's like we build with materials that are invisible, largely, but yet we have to like try a whole bunch of things, and a lot of them don't work, and then run experiments.
And a little art too, because we often say software engineer, and I don't love that term because, engineering is a very exacting science. And it's like software developers are more cowboy-esque. We're like, hey, let's figure it out. Let's blaze a new trail. Let's try something different. And it's not necessarily exacting as much as it is just let's bang our heads against the desk until you find out a cool new way of doing something.
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of finding out a cool new way of doing things and something that is not exact at all, how do you process the AI transformation that seems started ChatGPT, but when it really came to, this is going to change my job, we're not even a year in. So how do you, being an industry veteran, multiple decades experience, how do you process what's changing in the industry?
Well, I think the big thing is there's going to be a heavy increase in need for software developers, which is counterintuitive to what people think AI is going to create. There's this idea that AI is somehow going to replace all of our jobs, which would be bad, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think that the opposite is going to happen. But it's a new way of doing things. And part of this, you've mentioned that I've been in the industry 30 plus years. I've seen a few things, and I've seen this wave more than once. And I remember back in the late 90s, Microsoft Front Page came out and replaced all web developers, right? We didn't need web developers anymore because a person in accounting could create their own website. We just drag and drop. And, obviously, as we know, web development has been dead ever since. It's, the accountants and the marketing people just do it on their own, right? Like that's... Right. No, that's not what happened. And we did this over and over. We had low-code solutions, we had no-code solutions, and they're going to replace developers. And it's like, no, that's not what's going to happen. It's just going to be a new tool. And what we see is when we have these new tools, what it does is it expands the field rather than reducing the headcount. Now, there's always going to be some churn, some other things that come with that. But in the long run, the big picture, that's going to be the way that the field goes. It's going to grow and expand. I'm really excited for what it could be. I'm really cautious and nervous about what it is right now, because I think what it is right now is a whole bunch of people experimenting in production. And that's never a good thing. Like, there's so many things that can go wrong with that. But the thing I'm excited about is the fact that we look at software development, we think, Microsoft and Meta and Google and these big companies, but the reality is they're the vast minority of software developers. We think of them as software development, but really that's just the small tip of the iceberg of software developers. And it's the companies that have 5 developers, 10 developers that a lot of developers work for. Well, there's an awful lot of companies below even that. There's more of them that are not able to hire one developer yet. But even, before AI, if you hired one developer, well, you don't really have a software development department. You probably shouldn't do that because they're going on vacation. They can't support the full stack. We have developers complaining about employers want me to do the full stack and all this stuff. Well, yeah, because they can't afford more or they don't want to pay for more, one of the two. But these small companies can, instead of buying off the shelf, 80% is close enough for what my needs are, they can say, hey, let's create a customized product for us that will be exactly what we want, or 95% of what we want, and build it in-house. We'll hire one developer, 2 developers, AI empowered to do the full stack, to do the CI/CD and the server maintenance and all the rest using these tools, and they can hire one developer or 2 developers, and that's it. But there are so many more of these companies out there. They're kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting to do something like that I think is going to cause a huge boom in the field. Now, I also think there's another part of this, which is the number of companies who are foolishly pushing AI forward, going too fast and doing things that are work at first, but what they're doing is creating this massive code base they can't support. And I think there's going to be a big boom as well for software developers who know how to write software well, not just be a code jockey for, an AI code jockey, but take that software and bring it back into compliance, bring it back into, safety and security and performance and all these things. There's going to be a need there as well in the coming months, because moving fast and writing code. I actually have a episode coming out soon on my DevQuestions podcast about this. Moving fast and writing a lot of code is not a good thing, because what you do is you leave behind the planning, you leave behind the coordination. We in the 1975, I think it was, that the book about the mythical man month came out, and the idea that you can't just throw more developers at a project, it actually makes it slower. Well, that's what we're doing. We're just throwing AI developers at the project. Instead of 5 developers, now you have 25. Well, the communication breaks down. And so you have duplicate work, and you have miscommunication, you have things going in different directions instead of being focused and on task and on target. So I think from an AI perspective, there's a lot of churn right now. I think it's going to cause even more market churn coming up. But I think that it's really a big opportunity for software development. And I think that it's going to be an exciting time. The key is to keep our heads and do it the right way.
Nice. I love your point about keeping focused and understand, as opposed to just cranking out a whole bunch of code. Because I think any kind of comparison with software development always gets people that says, no, it's not like that. But even so, it makes my mind go to the building industry, just building a house. Let's say that there was this robot that would just build the house for you, and all you had to do was specify, okay, I want a room over here, I want a bedroom over here, I want a bathroom over here, and if it just started building rooms and connecting rooms, it's like, well, now we got 6 bedrooms. Yeah, but I have to walk through my master closet to get to this other kid's bedroom over, and without a coherent vision of the floor plan and the flow that you want, well, we could do the same thing with software.
For sure. Yeah, it really reveals how much you're not thinking about the planning of it when you start talking to an AI and you're like, I'm not quite sure what to say. Well, that's because you haven't planned it out well. If you have a very clear plan, you can have a much better result. But also, are we building too many rooms too fast? One of the things that people don't realize is that every line of code is a liability. The more code you have, the more you have to support. And when you're paving the whole parking lot, to get more and more stuff done, at some point you have to maintain that. It's going to work great today, but tomorrow, that maintenance bill comes due.
Yeah. Isn't that the same thing with physical possessions? Whatever you own owns you. Whatever you own requires some level of maintenance. I guess any boat owners or RV owners know what I'm talking about there. So awesome. Well, speaking of workflow and the software development lifecycle, just like Fred Brooks and the Mythical Man Month, the software development lifecycle is multiple decades old. Just the concept of, here's a series of things that tend to be in this order. Agile kind of got rid of the batching, and even if you do a single piece flow Kanban, there tends to be this series of activities that you do, the software development lifecycle. Do you see that being preserved, or do you see some of those stages being compressed in this AI transformation?
I think we too often hold too tightly to, this is the way we've always done it, right? And that's, the older you get, the more you like to do that, right? Like, I've always done it this way, I'm always going to do it this way. We should probably let go a little bit of that. But at the same time, too often we move too fast, which is we forget the lessons of the past and then repeat history, right? So there's definitely a balance there. I think that we're probably moving, some people, I'm not going to say everybody, but we're probably moving too fast in that compression, where we're saying, let's throw out all the stuff, we can just move faster. And that, I think, causes problems. I think it causes issues. Visual Studio Code is now usually once a month release. Now it's once a week release. There's some problems that come along with that, right? You naturally have to compress a lot. And so what you start to do is you start to cut corners, or say, well, the AI can do it entirely. Like, the AI can do all the checks, the AI can do all of the, the processes instead of human intervention or human oversight, at least. And that can be, I think, problematic. So I think that there's lessons we'll learn out of this by going too fast, that I think will kind of come back a bit. And I think that the lessons of the past on how to have a good process, how to have, a CI/CD process that's not just a rush to production. When I was early on in my career, it was you write the code and you put it into production. Like that was, step one, step two. And
Right.
they had some downsides, right? And so we learned how to have a better process with, a development server, a QA server, like all these different things to try and make sure that we are being careful in our process and making sure that we don't move too fast and break too many things. I think that some of that can probably be, like I said, compressed, but I think that we're going to find that there's a significant amount that we should still do and still have some good human oversight into to make sure that we're putting out quality, not just quantity.
Mhm.
And yes, moving fast can be good if you're doing it right, but you need to make sure that you're still keeping good processes in place so that you're moving fast with working code and with working solutions that your customers want. And we're going to see what the customer can support. Keeping up with weekly changes in VS Code, that's hard.
Yeah.
I don't want to be spending my entire time reading release notes every week about the new things, but yeah, that's how fast it's moving.
Mhm.
And if you're not careful, you'll get left behind a bit. So there's a balance there too, where maybe you don't fix things as fast. You add new features. Maybe it's fixing things, but not adding new features. And so we'll figure that out. It'll take time. It'll take doing things the wrong way. Back to the idea of engineering versus art. This is again where we get to play around with stuff. The industry is move fast and break things. Well,
Mhm.
part of that is okay because we're not building a physical building where we have to tear it down. The materials are expensive. The materials are cheaper and it's faster to tear down and redo. And so we'll figure some of that out just through trial and error.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that and your assessment that the demand for software development is going to increase and not decrease, what would you say to the, say, younger people listening who probably read magazine articles and other blog posts as, oh, nobody's hiring developers. You better switch from computer science now, or you better find another job. This company just laid off 16,000 developers. Versus you're saying, oh, we're about to or we are hitting a boom. So how do you explain? Because you train and talk to all kinds of people. How do you explain that to the younger people?
Yeah, so there's a few things there, and the first thing is not to be led by fear, because fear is a very bad way to live your life. If you lead by fear, or being led by fear, then you just make some bad decisions that you look back later and go, "Ooh, I should have done something different there." Um, it's always wise to be cautious going into any industry to make sure that you are making a wise decision. Is this right for me? When I was coming out of high school, I wanted to be an electrical engineer. I went to school for a year to be an electrical engineer. I love math. I found I didn't love it quite as much as I needed to be an engineer, because that's all those guys do. They do math. And I'm like, it's cool and all, but I don't want to do that my entire life. And so I found that I really like software development in that. And I'm like, this is the part that I want to do. And so, in some ways, it's like, well, I gave up on my career. No, I found out that this is a better career for me. I fit here better. But if I had been, figuring out based off of, well, I'll get paid X dollars more if I do this, that's not a wise way of doing things.
Yeah.
Because what you're going to find is, yeah, I'm miserable, but I'm getting paid. Right. And so part of life is figuring out, what are you good at? And if you're good at this thing, make it work, because it will work. So that's part of it. But then it comes to, I spend a lot of time in the numbers. I look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics has some really good numbers about who's being hired, who's not being hired, and right now, part of it is economically, we're not hiring in general, right? The whole country, we're talking US here now, but the US isn't hiring that well.
Yeah.
And if you look at software development, that's actually one of the fields we're up, I think, 10% in hiring over last year. So we're actually going up again.
Okay.
Now, if you zoom out, there is a massive hump in the graph that we're down to the bottom again, coming back up. And that's because of COVID. COVID
All the
had
free
this
money.
huge
Yeah.
hiring boom where, free money. And it was, if you were a software developer with a pulse, if you could
Yeah.
say, hello world, you got a job somewhere. And that's not reality. And so people who kind of came up in that are pretty, disenfranchised with the industry because it's no longer that way.
Mm-hmm.
4 years ago, I could just get a job and now I can't. Yes, that is true. And that's always been the case. Software development is a competitive field. It's one that doesn't take a lot of education to get into. You don't have to have the 7 years of a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. And yet you can get paid at that same level. And so there's always going to be competition. And it's really hard for us to determine who's a good software developer and who's not at the junior level.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to have to be some competition you go through. You're going to have to put the work in order to get to a place where you can be hireable and you can get the job that's going to eventually pay you well. The median salary for software development in the US is about double the median salary for the country as a whole. Like we make a lot of money, but in order to do that, there's a lot of competition.
Yeah.
And so the big thing for me is the hard work. I've trained software developers in the classroom. I've trained them, in online settings. And what I've seen is that certain people will drop off, when they hit that first problem, where they hit that first bug they can't fix.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just walk away and say, I can't do this. If you let that happen, then you're not going to make it, because the vast majority of our jobs is being stuck on problems, right? Problems we created probably, but problems. And so if you have just the tenacity to push through and say, I can do this, have confidence in yourself. And this is why when I teach, I usually give people problems, small ones, up front, and say, I'm not going to give you the answer. You figure it out. I've given you most of the information you need or all the information you need, but figure out the problem, because I want you to start practicing the idea of it's a small problem, but I overcame it. It's a small problem, but I overcame it. So it's a little bit bigger of a problem, but I overcame it. Because when you get out in the real world, you're not going to have a tutorial answer somewhere where it's like, oh, your boss asked you to implement this feature. Here's how I would have done it.
Right.
You're not going to have that.
Manual.
Right. So you're going to have to figure out how to work through that. And the earlier you can figure out to put that hard work in, the better. I tell my students, if you're learning software development, do not use AI. And that's, counterintuitive, but it's easier. And it's like, yes, it's a shortcut. But when you go to the gym, you don't want to watch somebody lift weights. You want to be the one lifting the weights. That's harder. It takes more work. It takes, it's putting in the effort and the sweat and the misery and the being tired. But I tell you what, at the end of the day, you are stronger for it.
Yeah.
If you watch somebody else do it, you're not gaining anything. In fact, you're losing, because you're not even maintaining where you're at. And it's the same with AI. If you let AI do the learning for you, or teaching even, what you're doing is watching a robot lift the weights. And it's like, that's not going to benefit you. And you're going to be easily replaceable because you're just a prompt jockey. And unfortunately, that's not going to be good enough as a software development industry grows.
Yeah. With my own kids, I've pushed and pushed with midway success on getting them to understand the advantage of actually knowing how to type. And you could make the argument, oh, just dictate to the computer or whatnot. But there's so many fields, and programming is just a step up above typing. But it takes practice. It takes working out your fingers and pushing through to actually become a fast typist. And lo and behold, you can't be a fast coder unless you're a fast typist. You can't be a fast prompter unless you're a fast typist. So, but I love your analogy of getting into the weight room and actually sweating and actually getting sore and pushing through instead of just observing. That's right. I want to kind of highlight some of your some of your publications and videos, and over your YouTube channel. We'll include a link to it in the show notes. I am Tim Corey. But recently, one of your videos kind of made me think. It was the why monoliths beat microservices almost every time. And that's kind of like an architectural thinking. If you put yourself in a certain specific situation, you might think, oh, well, that's perfect for microservices. But then you're broadening out because I think a lot of people say, oh, microservices, good, monolith, old, crusty. So I must do this new thing all the time. And so what caused your thinking to develop? And what were your observations where you said, you know what? It doesn't seem like this new microservices architecture should be the default first.
I think this is, again, this pendulum idea, right? Where we forget all lessons of the past, throw them all out because they're old, and it's the new way of doing things. And we try that for a little bit and we go, wait, we're learning some things. We need to kind of back off of this. And you find out maybe the lessons from the past weren't so old and crusty as much as they were set in stone or pretty much in stone because they were hard-won lessons, and I have seen, again, I'm old, but I've seen this idea of...
You're the right age.
Perfect, right? Like fine wine. It's been sitting in the basement too long. But the idea that, these new things come along, right? This new ideas, and everybody gets excited about a new idea. And that's part of this is, influencer culture. I hate that term. But the idea that people are going to watch because it's a video about the new latest thing. And what happens is newer developers see that and they think, well, that's what everyone is doing because it's what I see online all the time. And it's like, no, that's not what everybody's doing. It's just what everyone is excited to see. Therefore, it kind of snowballs on its own.
Yeah.
And it's not really what the reality is. I spent 6 years as a software development consultant early on in my career before I came back to it later. And so I went to dozens of companies and, from tiny to huge and saw how things worked. And the really cool thing is I saw how my decisions either made things better or worse. And the more you can see that, the more you get experience in understanding situational awareness, right? That there is no one right answer. I have a video, why it depends the best answer to any question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I go through all the different things you have to think about. And I go through half a dozen or a dozen of them. And I'm like, this is just scratching the surface of all the things I need to know to make a halfway informed decision. So when it came to microservices and monoliths, there was, with the rise of Azure and AWS and the ability to very easily spin up dozens of different services on dozens of different platforms and scale up and scale out and all these things, it became very easy, and then of course Kubernetes, that's all it was just, let's create hundreds of containers and have this swarm of things to maintain. But people started chasing after the architecture instead of asking the question of why. What do we actually need instead of, I have a solution, let's find a problem for it. And so, too often people think that they're the next Google, and it's like, you're just not. I love the fact that Stack Overflow published their diagram of their architecture because they were hosting at one point 1 billion page views a month.
Yeah,
and that's a
huge.
very large website, right? Like that's a lot of work. And they had 2 SQL servers maintaining Stack Overflow, and there are 2 hosting all the rest of Stack Exchange.
Yep.
And they had just a few web servers. Like they didn't have like this, massive microservice environment. It was a monolith.
Yep.
It was a simple monolith in many respects. And yet they were one of the largest sites in the world for technology.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are you expecting to be bigger than that? Like, come on, your little app isn't going to be there for a while.
Right.
And so you can take the time to write a monolith, do it well, get it out into production, support it well, and build up over time. And you know what? Maybe eventually you're going to need to have some microservices. Cool.
Yeah.
But and I think that people too often have looked at it and said, well, I'm going to need to scale immediately. And so what you do is you actually cost yourself because scale is actually expensive. It's not cheap, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of performance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you have a method calling another method internally, it's very fast.
Yep.
When you're calling a method that goes out to a messaging queue that then sends it to another service, that's never going to be instantaneous. It's never get close to that.
Right.
It's going to take time. And so, you know, we're making the wrong choices and saying, hey, let's build microservice environment because it's cool or because it's the hot thing or everyone's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I don't think that's the right question to ask when you're building an application. It's what's best for us, but also if you can't write a monolith well architected, well designed, so it is modular, so it's you know, loosely coupled, all these things, you're not going to do a microservice environment well either. Like you're going to make that an absolute mess. So it comes down to, can you build good architecture?
Mm-hmm.
I've had people argue with me that, you know, well, the problem with monoliths is they're tightly coupled. I'm like, why? That seemed like an architecture problem
Not
to
always.
me, not a problem with monoliths. Now, yes, we all cut corners and make things tightly coupled because we're, you know, trying to do things fast and all the rest. But again, it's not going to get better in a microservice environment. So, yeah, that was my kind of take on that. Is I want to make sure that people realize that just pursuing what influencers are talking about isn't a wise way to architect your application.
Mm-hmm.
You should know the why behind what you do.
Yeah. Well, I remember, I love that wisdom. It reminds me of a write-up that I don't know, 25 years ago, Dell.com. Dell had just overtaken Compaq for, you know, it was in the heyday where Dell was like king of the world PC maker, and you could order your PC on the website, and the website had performance problems. And it was done in active server pages at the time, active server pages with COM plus components into your architecture. So web process, the middle, you know, business logic process running in COM plus, and then separate SQL server. And they solved their performance problem at the time by getting rid of the COM plus boundary and just taking those DLLs and running them in process on the IIS web server, which for performance reasons, just that network hop from web process to another process running on a different server killed them. But even beyond performance, it seems like there's always got to be a reason to segment. And yeah, performance, but I mean, you got fault tolerance. It's like, well, what if this fails? I don't want this to fail also. And so, but it's always down to the reason of, okay, you can run in one place until something forces you to segment somehow. And do you segment the code or do you segment it at runtime? It doesn't have to be the same.
Yeah, I think that too often we fall in love with the idea of architecture for architecture's sake, right? You know, like design patterns. People really want me to create a design patterns course, and I haven't yet. I will at some point, but
it would be a great course at the right time.
It would be a great course, but I really want to have a very big caveat at the beginning. Like, stop. Don't just take every design pattern you see here and put it into an application. Because every design pattern has a cost. And sometimes that cost is too high. You know, yes, it has a benefit, but there's a cost to it. And sometimes the best solution is a console application that has one method that you just put your code in. You know, I have a video that is the tongue-in-cheek, but it's the world's best Hello World application or something like that. And it's a console application, but I do dependency injection, I do logging, and I do interface segregation. I do like all these things. And you write, you know, hundreds of lines of code to say, hello world, right? And we started the whole thing with the template that was just that one line of code that said console.writeline, hello world. And I'm like, yes, but it's better now, right? Like, no, it's not better now. It's actually more complicated, harder to maintain. So yeah, there's a balance and there's a pragmatism we have to have where sometimes the best solution is all in one app, you know, all in one EXE or one DLL. And sometimes, yes, it is segmenting out and you have to be wise about when to break those boundaries up.
Isn't that the same thing with this concept of, quote, best practices? There's so many that if you were to try to implement all the things that have been called a best practice, you can't do it because some of them are mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, dry is a really abused one. Don't repeat yourself. No, repeat yourself. It's just that, yes, there's a principle there that stands up well, but sometimes repetition's a good thing. Where people really get squirrely with me is when I'll have like an API where I'll have a model that sends data to the database, but then I'll have a different model in the front end that's the same exact model or practically the same model, but it's a copy. And they're like, why don't you create a separate DLL and link to both of them, and then you can have a shared DLL? And I'm like, because I'm going to decorate one model probably in the future at some point with things like, max length or min length or other things that don't need to be in the other model. And when you start to try and make these things, dry, well, what you're actually doing is causing yourself a headache down the road and not really solving any problems. Like, why does it matter? Let's solve real problems. And yeah, that takes time to learn. When you're first learning, you learn all these principles and patterns and things, and you think that these are just things you have to do. And it's like, no, it's all pragmatic. It's all based upon it depends.
But you brought up a really good architectural concept. The implementation may look like the same thing, but architecturally, it's a different thing. This is the UI's representation of that data structure. And here's a server-side representation of that data structure. The class may look identical right now, but it is a different thing.
Yeah. And knowing that is part of kind of growing up as a software developer, learning the difference and learning how to look at a situation and go, I need duplication here, or I need to deduplicate at some point.
Yeah. I can imagine the don't repeat yourself or efficiency consultant coming into a mechanic shop and saying, why do we have so many 10 millimeter wrenches? Nope, we're going to get more efficient. We're going to have one set of wrenches. When you need the 10 millimeter wrench, just go across the shop and get it. And then, of course, we all know what happens then. So
it's lost.
Yeah, or gets lost, or 10 people are waiting in line for the 10 millimeter wrench. So
absolutely. It's the wisdom of time. And that's one of the things that I sometimes get frustrated by. And this is one of the reasons why I do my channel, is because too often senior developers don't share that wisdom, right? Like, we've been there, we've seen that, a major part of our job is to help inform the next generation, help the next generation understand. When I was raising my boys are 23 and 21 now. When I was raising them, I said, you have a choice to make. You can either learn from my mistakes, or you can repeat them and learn from your own mistakes.
Yeah.
And so my thought there was, hey, I will tell you all the things that I did wrong. And you can see that pain, you can see the problems that it caused, and you can go, oh, I'm not going to do that. Or you can decide just to step in it yourself. But, too often senior developers kind of miss that opportunity to give that to the next generation, to say, hey, here's all the mistakes that I've made. Let me help you, miss these potholes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Well, speaking of learning from other people's mistakes and successes, as we close up here, how can the listeners learn more from you?
You can find me everywhere, iamtimcorey.com or iamtimcorey. So YouTube is where I have, I think, 900 videos now on YouTube for free. I try and put in playlists and group them, but there's a lot of them. So YouTube is where I have a training videos for free on Mondays and a DevQuestion podcast video on Thursdays. And then if you want paid resources, iamtimcorey.com has full courses that'll be out as well. But those are what fund the free content, so we can do more free stuff, and I try and give away as many free things as possible. I think we're up to 6 or 7 free courses that I've given away on YouTube or on my site. So
nice. And on your catalog, you do have the AI Fundamentals course in your catalog.
I do. I create a course called Navigate AI. And the goal is not to teach you the technology as far as like, here's how to run Claude or here's how to, it's actually me talking to you. And what I do, I teach you how to navigate, how to think about AI, how AI works, how it's built, how it reasons and creates logic and how it can be useful, but also not useful. Here's the pitfalls, that still apply, even a year later when things have changed in the AI world. Well, the fundamentals haven't. And so I teach people how to navigate that and how to, set up their careers so that they're not falling under the wheel of AI, but instead are being empowered by it and being able to succeed in the marketplace today.
Yeah. Good stuff. We'll include all those links in the show notes. And for anybody that hasn't encountered Tim Corey before, he is a phenomenal teacher. This is just a taste of how clearly he explains things. So check those out. But Tim, thanks for coming on the show with me and just having a great conversation with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. And until next time, dear listener, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the AI DevOps podcast. You can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and everywhere else. Visit our sponsor, ClearMeasure, at clearmeasure.com. And on behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.